Today we have new information on a U.S. citizen arrested in Haiti in connection with last week's presidential assassination. A U.S. law enforcement source told CBS News that Joseph Vincent was a confidential informant for the Drug Enforcement Administration on and off for several years. The source says he was not involved with the DEA at the time of the attack. Mola Lengai is in Haiti's capital.
President Jovenel Moise was gunned down by assailants claiming to be members of the DEA exactly 1 week ago. We now know one of those men, 55-year-old Haitian-American Joseph Vincent, previously worked for the DEA as an informant. The Drug Enforcement Administration denies any involvement with the assassination. Former DEA agent Mike Vigil has worked with informants in Haiti, but he had not worked with Vincent.
These are individuals that are usually engaged in criminal activities, but we use them because they can provide very valuable information on the activities of criminal groups, the organizational hierarchy of these groups as well.
Haitian police remain focused on another Florida resident they arrested, Christian Sanon, who they say was a key player in the assassination. We spoke to Haitian professor Michel Planchet, who confirmed reports that he and Sanon spoke as recently as last month, and that Sanon told him he was on a mission to replace Moise, and that Moise would be resigning soon. Planchet denies any involvement.
Here at the Prime Minister's residence, the acting head of government is requesting patience in the investigation. The question is, how much patience, as fear and instability continue to rise here? Do you feel safe here?
No. No, I don't think anyone feels safe.
Kalinda Maguire builds clean-burning stoves for Haitians who are living in poverty. She told us she has no plans to leave, despite the political chaos.
There's a lot of people here that regardless of who is holding the political power are willing to work for their country and make changes happen. I think that's what's important to highlight.
Here in Haiti's capital, the U.S. government making its presence known. They've sent in a dozen additional Marines to the U.S. Embassy here to beef up security as the investigation into President Moise's assassination continues. Mola Lengai, CBS News, Port-au-Prince.
And meantime, the streets of Havana, Cuba are quiet following mass anti-government protests unlike anything seen in years. Cuba is blaming the protests on U.S. sanctions and Cuban Americans instigating unrest on social media. Now, the White House is reviewing its Cuba policy, but the U.S. is warning Cubans not to come here. Ed Augustine reports from Havana.
Tense calm has descended on Havana, now in its third day after unprecedented nationwide protests. These protests primarily motivated by deprivation for two main factors. First of all, the pandemic that has stripped the island of tourism and the $3 billion of revenue that the state normally gets because of that tourism, and also because of Trump sanctions that remain in place to this day. President Biden yet to rescind any of those more than 200 measures that were meted out against the island, and the result of that is playing out in Havana. Head of U.S. Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas, himself a Cuban American, said he had a simple message for Cubans who are thinking of braving the Florida Straits and making it to the United States. Do not come, you will be turned home.
Any migrant intercepted at sea, regardless of their nationality, will not be permitted to enter the United States.
In a way, this humanitarian crisis is forcing the Biden administration's hand. Is he going to prioritize those 60% or so Cuban American voters in South Florida that voted Trump, that do not want engagement, that do not want normalization? Or is he going to put human rights at the center of his foreign policy and allow the Cuban state to import the medicine, the fuel, and the food that 11.3 million Cubans so desperately need?
And meantime, the Cuban government is lifting customs restrictions on food, medicine, and hygiene products. Wednesday's announcement comes 3 days after mass protests erupted across the island, driven in part by chronic shortages in stores. Now the new measure will stay in place for the rest of the year. Cuba's president has called protesters criminals, but he has also said the government needs to do more outreach and improve conditions in poor neighborhoods that were rocked. by protests. And Grenada, I should say, is adjusting its entry requirements for incoming travelers effective July 31st of 2021. All visitors arriving in Grenada by air or seaport must be fully vaccinated against COVID-19, and children under the age of 13 will only spend 48 hours in quarantine once they are accompanied by a fully vaccinated individual. The change in policy forms part of the government's ongoing efforts to control the spread of COVID-19 on the island. The island's health minister, Nicholas Steele, announced the two policy changes during a post-cabinet press briefing.
Outside of citizens and residents of Grenada, no one is allowed to enter Grenada unless they are fully vaccinated. So citizens and residents can return to Grenada whether vaccinated or unvaccinated. But any visitor to Grenada must be fully vaccinated from the 31st of July. We have given, we hope, enough notice for individuals. We do apologize for any inconvenience that this may bring to persons. We've had consultations with the Grenada Hotel and Tourism Association, the GTA, and other stakeholders as well to give them as much warning as possible.
And Health Minister Steele said that Grenada's low rate of infection is linked directly to the island's strict measures at ports of entry, even as the lamented slow pace of which citizens are becoming inoculated. While outlining the coming change, he cited alarming statistics from neighboring islands which indicate that COVID-19 cases are going up.
My brothers and sisters, we are not any different, just that to date we have been spared based on the restrictive measures that have come at a significant cost and inconvenience to us all. These restrictive measures should not have to continue. We should be looking at further easement of these measures because we should be at a level where our population is protected by utilizing all of the tools. So I urge all of you who have not yet taken the vaccine to please come forward. Take the vaccine, inquire with the Ministry of Health to get whatever information is relevant to that. Do not follow disinformation. We need to get past this.
And before we head to break, we have an important notice to share with you. Johnson & Johnson is recalling some of its sunscreen brands. Now that's after company testing identified low levels of benzene and cancer-causing organic chemical compounds. The voluntary recall includes all lots of 5 Neutrogena and Aveeno aerosol sunscreen product lines to the consumer level. Now the only sunscreen products affected are again the aerosol type of products.